The rain had just stopped when Keanu Reeves stepped out of the quiet side door of the theater. It was late. The streets were wet, and the golden reflections from the street lamps danced across the pavement. He walked slowly, his hands deep in his coat pockets, head slightly lowered as if he was carrying a thought too heavy to put down. The night smelled faintly of rain and old brick, the kind of scent that always made him feel both calm and sad at the same time. He didn't expect to see anyone there. But under the soft glow of the nearest streetlight, Sandra Bullock stood waiting. She was leaning against a railing, hair a little damp from the drizzle, her eyes following him as he approached. She didn't speak. She simply stepped forward, closed the distance between them, and wrapped her arms around him. It wasn't a hurried hug. It wasn't one of those quick greetings people give without thought. It was slow, steady, and warm. Like she was trying to say something without words, and maybe she knew he would understand. Keanu didn't move at first. Then, gently, he placed his arms around her too. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. "You didn't have to wait out here." Sandra smiled faintly against his shoulder. "Yes, I did." The moment lingered. They didn't notice the soft sound of footsteps behind them until it stopped. When Keanu turned slightly, he saw Ana de Armas standing a few steps away. She wasn't in the light. She was in the shadow, close enough to see them, far enough to keep her distance. She wasn't frowning. She wasn't even curious. She just had this small, knowing smile, like she understood more than she was letting on. Ana didn't interrupt. She didn't rush forward or call out. She stood there, watching, her arms loosely crossed, her expression calm. In that silence, there was something unspoken between all three of them. Not rivalry, not jealousy, but something softer, something more complicated. Respect, maybe, or quiet understanding of the lives they had all lived. Keanu released Sandra slowly. Sandra took a small step back, but her hand stayed briefly on his arm before she let it fall. She glanced toward Ana and gave a small nod, a silent greeting. Ana returned the nod, her smile staying, almost like she was saying, "It's okay. I'm not here to take anything away. I'm just here." But beneath that quiet exchange, there was an undercurrent Keanu felt instantly. Something was going on. Something none of them were putting into words yet. He could see it in Sandra's eyes, in the way she looked tired even when she smiled. He could sense it in Anna's stillness, in how she seemed to be reading the air like every detail mattered. "You two should come inside," Keanu said finally, his voice low but steady. "It's warmer." Neither of them moved right away. The streetlight hummed faintly. The wet pavement reflected their shapes like ghostly shadows. For a few long seconds, it was just the sound of the city breathing quietly around them. Keanu knew something was about to shift between them. Maybe not tonight, maybe not in a dramatic way, but something in the air had already changed. The hug, the smile, the silence. They weren't just random moments. They were pieces of something bigger, something that would test all of them in ways they didn't yet see coming. He didn't know it yet, but this night would be the first time all three of them would stand together in the same quiet space before a storm none of them were expecting. And when it came, they would each have to choose how far they were willing to go for each other. And for Keanu, it would mean facing a truth he had avoided for years. Inside the small side lounge of the theater, the air felt warmer, but it carried a kind of weight that made silence heavy. The walls were lined with old photographs of past productions, faces smiling from decades ago, some of which Keanu recognized from his earliest days in the industry. A faint smell of coffee lingered, though the machine on the counter was long switched off. Sandra sat on the worn leather couch near the window. She leaned back, her eyes following the rain outside like she was searching for answers there. Ana stood near the counter, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of tea Keanu had poured for her. She hadn't taken a sip yet, just held it, letting the heat soak into her palms. Keanu moved quietly between them, like a man used to carrying two separate worlds at the same time. He knew both of them well, different times, different projects, different memories. But in this moment, the three of them were here together, and it felt like there was something fragile in the air. "So, what's going on?" Keanu asked softly, his voice more of an invitation than a demand. Sandra hesitated, glancing briefly at Anna before answering. "You ever have one of those days where something just stays in your chest? Like you can't name it, but it's there?" Keanu nodded slowly. "Yeah, I've had more than a few." "Today was one of those," Sandra said, her voice dipping low. "I almost left without saying goodbye. But then I saw you walk out that door, and I didn't want to let you go without that hug." Anna finally spoke, her voice calm but edged with something thoughtful. "Sometimes, a hug says more than anything else could." She looked at Sandra for a long second before lowering her gaze to the teacup. "And sometimes, it's for you, as much as it is for the other person." The room went still again. Keanu felt there was something Sandra wasn't saying, and maybe something Anna already knew. He had learned over the years that not every truth needed to be pulled out immediately. Sometimes you had to wait, give people the space to hand it over when they were ready. "There's more to it, isn't there?" Keanu asked gently. Sandra smiled faintly but didn't deny it. "Maybe." Anna set the tea down and walked toward the window, standing beside Sandra but not too close. Her presence wasn't heavy. It was quiet, almost protective. "Whatever it is," Anna said softly, "you don't have to carry it alone." Keanu noticed the way Sandra looked at her then, like she was surprised by the kindness, but also relieved. There was no competition in the room, no edge, just three people, each holding their own storms. But then Sandra's phone buzzed. The sound was sharp in the quiet space. She glanced at the screen, and in that instant, something in her face changed. She didn't say who it was, but she locked the phone and slid it into her bag without a word. Keanu caught the shift. Anna caught it too. "You sure you're okay?" Keanu asked again, this time leaning forward a little. Sandra nodded quickly, maybe too quickly. "Yeah, just tired." But Keanu knew tired. And this wasn't tired. This was something else, something waiting to be spoken, something that could either draw them closer or push them apart depending on how it came out. He didn't press. Instead, he reached over and placed his hand lightly over hers. "You don't have to say it tonight, but when you do, we'll be here." Anna glanced at him, then at Sandra, and gave a quiet nod in agreement. And for the first time that night, Sandra's shoulders eased, just a little. None of them knew it yet, but that small promise, spoken in the warm, dim light of the side lounge, was going to be tested sooner than they could imagine. And when it was, the cost would not be small. The next day, the city felt different. The rain had cleared overnight, leaving the streets washed clean and bright under a pale morning sun. Keanu walked along the quiet block near the theater, his coat collar turned up against the lingering chill. He was on his way to meet Sandra and Anna for breakfast, a rare plan they had agreed on the night before without much discussion. He spotted them through the window of a small cafe on the corner. Sandra was already seated at a table by the window, a cup of coffee in front of her. She was wearing sunglasses even though the light outside was gentle. Anna sat opposite her, her hair loosely tied back, her fingers resting around a mug of tea. From the street, Keanu could tell they were talking, but it wasn't light conversation. Their postures were slightly tense, their expressions serious. When he walked in, the bell above the door gave a soft ring. Both women looked up at him. Sandra removed her sunglasses, offering a small smile, but there was a flicker in her eyes, something still guarded. Anna's gaze met his for a moment, and he could tell she was measuring whether to say something now or later. He sat down between them. "Morning," he said softly. "How are we doing today?" Anna glanced at Sandra, as if giving her the choice to speak. Sandra stirred her coffee slowly before answering. "Better than last night, but not by much." Keanu waited. "It's nothing dramatic," Sandra said finally, though her tone betrayed her. "Just personal stuff. Something I've been avoiding for a long time." Anna leaned forward slightly. "Avoiding doesn't make it smaller. It just waits for you." Sandra gave a small laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was too true. "I know. I just didn't expect to be thinking about it now with you two here. But maybe that's exactly why it's coming up." Keanu's voice was steady. "If it matters to you, it matters to us." Sandra looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing whether she could believe that. Then she set her coffee down and folded her hands on the table. "Someone reached out to me yesterday. Someone I haven't spoken to in years. And it's complicated. They want to meet." "Complicated how?" Keanu asked gently. Sandra's gaze dropped to the table. "It's about something I walked away from. Something I swore I'd never go back to. But they're saying it's important. Life-changing." Anna tilted her head slightly. "For them, or for you?" "For both," Sandra said quietly. Keanu didn't speak right away. He knew better than to rush to advice when someone was still halfway in their own thoughts. Instead, he reached for his coffee and took a slow sip, letting her continue if she wanted to. "I don't know if I can face it," Sandra admitted. "And I don't know if I can ignore it either." The table fell into silence again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that held weight. Three people thinking about the same thing from different angles. Anna was the one who broke it. "If you go, we'll go with you." Sandra's head lifted slightly, her eyes searching Anna's face for a hint of hesitation. There was none. "That's not your responsibility," Sandra said softly. Anna's voice was calm. "It's not about responsibility. It's about standing next to someone when it matters." Keanu nodded. "She's right. You don't have to walk into whatever this is alone." For a moment, Sandra looked like she might argue, but then her shoulders lowered, the fight leaving her. "Okay," she whispered. "If I decide to go, I'll let you know." None of them noticed the man sitting 2 tables away, half hidden behind a newspaper. He wasn't reading. He was listening. And as the three of them talked, his eyes never left their table. They would only discover later that he wasn't a stranger at all. The man with the newspaper was gone by the time they left the cafe. None of them had seen him slip out, and none of them had any reason yet to think his presence meant anything. The sun had risen higher, warming the sidewalks, and the morning air carried the smell of fresh bread from the bakery down the street. Keanu walked on one side of Sandra, Anna on the other. Their pace was slow, unhurried, but Sandra's mind was moving faster than her steps. She kept glancing down at her phone, the unread message from the day before still sitting there like a stone she didn't know how to move. "You've been quiet," Anna said gently. "Just thinking," Sandra replied, though her voice sounded like she was somewhere far away. Keanu glanced at her, his eyes narrowing slightly, not in judgment but in concern. "Is it the same thing we talked about?" She nodded once. "I haven't replied yet. Part of me wants to delete it and forget I ever saw it, but I can't stop wondering why they reached out now after all these years." Anna's voice was soft but steady. "Maybe they need something only you can give." Sandra shook her head. "Or maybe they want to pull me back into something I've worked hard to leave behind." They reached the end of the block, waiting at a crosswalk. Keanu could see in her posture that she was leaning toward walking away from it all. But he could also see the part of her that was curious, even if she didn't want to admit it. As they crossed, Keanu's phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket and glanced at the screen. It was a number he didn't recognize, but the message was short and unsettling. "You should tell her she's being watched." He stopped walking without meaning to. Anna noticed first. "What is it?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He turned, scanning the street behind them, but it looked ordinary. People going about their day, cars passing, sunlight glinting off windshields. Still, the message had sharpened his senses instantly. "Keanu?" Sandra's voice was questioning now. He slipped the phone back into his coat. "Nothing we can't handle." But that wasn't entirely true. They decided to spend the rest of the day together, maybe to take Sandra's mind off things. They walked through a small park, stopped for coffee again, and ended up in a quiet bookstore where Anna wandered between the aisles, her fingertips brushing the spines of old novels. Sandra sat with Keanu near the back, flipping through a book she wasn't reading. That's when Keanu saw him again, the same man from the cafe, standing just outside the shop window, pretending to look at his phone. Keanu leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Sandra, I think you should tell us exactly who sent you that message yesterday." She looked startled. "Why?" "Because I think someone is following you," Keanu said quietly. Anna returned to the table at that moment, catching only the last words. "Following her?" Keanu nodded toward the window, but when they all turned to look, the man was gone again. Sandra's voice was tight. "This isn't about curiosity anymore. This is about someone making sure I don't ignore them." Anna's expression changed. No fear, just a sharp, calm focus. "Then we need to know who we're dealing with." Sandra hesitated, then finally said it. "His name is Michael. We used to work together, years ago. We didn't part on good terms." Keanu kept his voice level. "And now he's reaching out?" "Yes," Sandra said. "And if he's sending people to watch me, it means he's serious about whatever he wants." Anna exchanged a look with Keanu. "Then maybe we meet him before he forces the meeting himself." Keanu agreed with a slow nod. "But we do it on our terms, not his." None of them realized that Michael already knew exactly where they were headed next. They met again that evening in Keanu's apartment, a quiet space high above the city. The wide windows showed the skyline glowing against the night, but inside, the mood was tense. Sandra sat at the edge of the couch, her phone on the coffee table like it was something dangerous. Anna paced slowly near the window, arms folded, her mind clearly working. Keanu leaned against the kitchen counter, watching them both. "If we're going to do this," Anna said finally, "we need to control everything. Where we meet him, who's nearby, how we leave if things go wrong." Sandra looked up at her. "You make it sound like we're walking into something dangerous." Anna didn't hesitate. "We are." Keanu pushed away from the counter and moved toward them. "Anna's right. If Michael has people following you, it means he doesn't trust you to show up on your own. That's a bad sign." Sandra sighed, pressing her palms against her knees. "He wasn't always like this. There was a time when I thought he was one of the most decent people I knew. But something changed, and I left before it got worse." Keanu crouched down in front of her. "Then whatever this is now, we face it together. No surprises, no walking in blind." Anna stopped pacing. "Where does he want to meet?" Sandra hesitated before answering. "He said, the pier. Tomorrow night." He made it sound like it had to be there. Keanu frowned. "A public place, but open enough that someone can watch from a distance." Anna nodded slowly. "And open enough that we can see him coming too." Keanu's phone buzzed again. This time the message was even shorter. "Don't bring them." He didn't tell Sandra and Anna right away. Instead, he slipped the phone into his pocket and said, "We'll go together, no matter what he says." The next day felt long. Sandra tried to distract herself with small errands, but her mind kept circling back to the pier. Anna spent most of the day with her, staying close, almost protective without making it obvious. Keanu made quiet preparations, calls to a friend who knew security work, checking the area ahead of time, making sure there were 2 ways in and out. By the time the sun dipped low, the pier was cast in a soft orange light. The water moved lazily against the wooden supports, and the air smelled faintly of salt and rust. Sandra arrived with Keanu and Anna at her side. She wore a simple, dark coat, her hands in her pockets. Keanu kept scanning the area, his calm expression masking the fact that he was tracking every movement around them. Anna walked slightly behind Sandra, her eyes alert. They reached the end of the pier before they saw him. Michael was leaning against the railing, his back to the water, hands in his coat pockets. He looked older than Sandra remembered, but there was something sharp in his eyes when he saw her. "You came," Michael said, his voice steady but carrying something cold underneath. "You made sure I would," Sandra replied, her tone just as controlled. Michael's gaze flicked to Keanu and Anna. "I told you to come alone." Keanu stepped forward slightly. "And she told you she wouldn't." Michael's eyes narrowed, but he didn't argue. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder at the water, then back at Sandra. "I didn't call you here for a fight. I called you because you have something I need." "I don't have anything of yours," Sandra said quickly. Michael shook his head. "Not something. Someone." Anna's posture changed instantly, still but coiled, like she was ready to move if she had to. Keanu's gaze didn't leave Michael's face. "What are you talking about?" Sandra asked, her voice lower now. Michael's answer came slowly. "He's in trouble, and you're the only one he'll listen to." For the first time, Sandra's guarded expression cracked. She knew exactly who he meant, and so did Michael. The sound of the waves under the pier seemed louder after Michael's words. Sandra's eyes stayed locked on him, but her mind was already racing back to a face she hadn't seen in years. Keanu didn't speak, but he could see the way her breathing shifted, the way her hands tightened in her pockets. Anna stood silent beside her, her gaze moving between Sandra and Michael like she was reading a language no one else could see. "You're lying," Sandra said at last, though her voice lacked the certainty she wanted it to have. Michael shook his head slowly. "I wish I was, but he's not safe. And if you walk away now, you won't get another chance to see him alive." Anna stepped forward then, her voice calm but edged with steel. "If you're telling the truth, then you should have come without shadows. No men watching her, no threats in the dark. That's not how you ask for help." Michael's eyes shifted to her. "And you are?" Anna's expression didn't change. "Someone who knows what it's like to be lied to." There was a silence then, thick enough to press on the air between them. Keanu broke it. "If we're going to talk, we do it somewhere else, somewhere we choose." Michael hesitated, then gave a single short nod. "Fine, but we move now." They walked together, the 4 of them leaving the pier. Keanu stayed close to Sandra, Anna a step behind, watching every corner and shadow. The city lights glowed against the night sky, but the streets felt narrower, the spaces between buildings darker. They ended up in a small diner on the edge of the waterfront district. The place was nearly empty, just the hum of the fridge and the clink of cutlery from the kitchen. They slid into a booth, Michael across from Sandra, Keanu on one side, Anna on the other. "Start talking," Sandra said, her voice sharper now. Michael leaned forward. "He reached out to me 2 weeks ago. Said he was in trouble. Said he couldn't trust anyone else but you. I told him you'd never come, but he insisted. And then he went quiet. Disappeared. And you think I can find him? Sandra said flatly. Michael nodded. You're the only one who can. Anna's eyes never left him. Or the only one who will. There's a difference. Michael looked at her again, and for a brief moment his expression shifted, like he saw something in her that unsettled him. But then it was gone. I'm telling you the truth. You can hate me all you want, but he doesn't have time for that. Keanu leaned in slightly. If we help you, you play by our rules. No more games, no more watching from a distance. We move together, or we don't move at all. Michael gave another slow nod, but his eyes stayed on Sandra. So, what's your answer? Sandra glanced at Keanu, then at Anna. There was no hesitation in their faces, only steady, quiet support. Finally, she spoke. We find him. But if you've lied about any of this, you'll regret it. Michael didn't smile, but something in his shoulders eased, like he had expected her to walk away. As they left the diner, Anna walked beside Sandra, her voice low enough for only her to hear. You're not doing this alone. Not for a second. Sandra gave her a small, grateful smile. I know. And as they stepped back into the night, Keanu just ahead of them, none of them realized that somewhere across the street, a camera lens was already tracking their every move, capturing the first steps of a search that would test them all in ways they couldn't yet imagine.